you can, then you know what to do. Okay, we're gonna start. So the last two lessons that we talk about is we talk about type of data. We talk about the group of people, the group of target that we will look at, like population and sample. For today, we're gonna actually talk about how to design an experiment. So I'm gonna close this. Okay. All right. The goal for all the things that we've been talking about is that we're gonna collect data and then use data to make decisions. It's important that we know what we have, right? And use that data to say, okay, based on this is what I'm gonna do. That's the same thing for you right now. Is that when you look at the colleges, right, university, places, state that you want to go to, and you do some research, right? So what you do is you collect the data. So these are the steps that you can do to collect that data. Is that first, you're going to identify the variables of the interest and the population of the study. So let's talk about what you guys doing right now is that you talk about colleges, right? You look at a bunch of colleges and you're going to narrow down what are the colleges that you want to go to. So for me, when I applied for college, I narrowed down to about 5, right? The top 5 that I like, and then I apply because you have to, I don't know about you, but when I was applying for college, we have to pay. And you don't want to apply for many college and then you have to pay. So what I did was I was be able to get my counselor. She was be able to give me a waiver for about 5. So that's why I got 5, right? It's not, it just, I'm only apply up to 5 free, and then the rest I have to pay. So I really have to narrow down to the top 5 that I really want. Okay, then you develop a plan. So what you do, well, okay, I want these 5 colleges. Now what? So you do some research. Like you go to the website, you call the counselor, you call the office, the admission office, just to figure out what is available for you, is this fit for you or not, right? And then you get the information by calling them, so that's to collect data. So this is the piece that we're going to focus on for this lesson. And that should be something that we'll talk about when we get back, when I see you next, not next time, but a day after that. Then we talk about how we can make it work, okay? And then you use the data. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And you look at the numbers, you look at the teacher-student ratio, you look at the tuition, you look at how much they gave you, and then you decide, I'm going to go to DePaul because this fit me the most. They gave me the most money. It's nearby my house. Save me money. I'm like, no, I don't want to live in Chicago. I want to move to somewhere else. I'm done living with my parents. It's a chance for me to be out elsewhere, right? So those are the things that when you're going to use that information to make decisions. So that is, it's not really an experiment for you, but it's like the idea of you do a research to make a decision that's best for you, okay? All right, so there are a couple ways for you to collect that data. The first one is observational. The second one is perform an experiment. The third one is simulation, and the last one is using survey. The first one, observational, is kind of the name itself tell you what to do, and number 4 is survey. Most of us know what is a survey. But the problem with observational and survey, sometimes it's really easy for us to get confused when we actually have to identify from a scenario. So the assignment that I will ask you to do next time is to help us to clarify this a little bit better, help you understand this a little bit better. Okay, so look at the first one, observational study. You only observe, but you do not change the existing condition. What that means is, you think about when we're in school, you always have admins come into the classroom, or sometimes you have CEP people or from outside of the school. We have like visitor, about 10 of them be in the classroom at one time, and they just like with a clipboard, they jot down something. That is observational study. They're in the building, they're in the classrooms that serve us. They don't interact with you, they don't ask questions, they don't do anything with us. But at the end of the day, they provide information to the principal, to Ms. Bennett, to us, so we know how we did. So right now, the bottom says the researcher observed and recorded the mouthing behavior of non-food objects of children up to 3 years old, right? So they are to observe. Okay. If you have questions, you can put in the chat or you can unmute and ask me, right? Performance experiment. So this is the thing is sometimes we get easy to confuse between observational and experiment is that we have to look at what happened. But for performance experiments, we have to provide treatment. You have to do something to your population, to your sample first, before you can observe. So that's something that when we look at your sample, hopefully that will help. So a treatment is applied. You don't have to jot this down, but if you have a piece of paper, I would like you to write out the four things: observational, experiment, and simulation and survey. I want you to jot those 4 things down because when we do an example, you should have those 4 in front of you. So take a minute. The last one is observational. This one is experiment. Just write out the name. You don't have to copy down everything. This should be in your note, okay? I post that for you. Let me record again. A treatment is applied. The other part may not have the treatment, so you can compare the two. So an experiment is you have something to compare, something that you have the end result that you want to see. This is my theory. Is this going to work, right? So for example, a placebo may be given in control group. So it's just test. Sometimes people in their mind, they think that, oh, I'm taking the medication, I should feel better. But a placebo is really like a sugar pill. It's not real medication. It looks like it, but it's not it. And some people took it and they feel better. So they may not need the medication. There's something in their head. So there's more. We'll look at more example with this. Okay. The third one is the use simulation. We talked about this, I believe, last time. Is that it's the use of mathematical or physical model to reproduce a condition of a situation or process. For example, use dummies to study the effects of crashes on humans. When we use a simulation, is that it's really harmful for you to do it yourself. You don't want to put yourself at risk, right? I'm not going to put myself in the car and then try to see if that affects me. How is that with or without a seatbelt, right? We need to use the dummy. Or we talk about buildings. If it's crashes, is what happened. Or we talk about airplane, right? We're going to study airplane crashes. How does that affect you if they drop? So those are the things that's like, I don't want to do it myself. Or the damage and the cost. If you have to break something, we want to do a model of it, okay? So think about, you want to test out the building, right? You don't want to actually build the entire building and then smash it. But we can make a model to test. So those are the things that we have to use model or mathematical to figure out what is the probability of this going to be successful, okay? So simulation is when you cannot do it yourself. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. The last one is survey. We do this a lot on social media or the census, right? We send letters, interview, mail, phone, Google Docs, Twitters, polls. We do that all the time. What does that do? What the difference between the surveys and observational is that survey you don't really do anything to, but you don't have to be there, right? You send a question and somebody else that you may not see may give you the response versus the observational that you are there to look at what happened and you are the one who recording down the results, the observation, the data. You collect the data, you are there. Versus the survey, you don't have to be there. You can send an email, you can send a letter, you can do a Google Doc, you can do a poll, whatever that works for you. You don't have to be there. So that's the difference between survey and observational. Okay, so let's do some practice. You can put the response. It's for the following, it's a study of effects of change in flight patterns on the number of airplane accidents. This is a study of the effect of flight and patterns on the number of airplane accidents. So like I said, this was kind of like your participation. At the end of the day, I'm start putting grade in because, like I said, I don't want you to sit behind the screen and not doing practice. And that's the problem when I've noticed on your summative is that you get confused. you did not choose the right answer. Okay, so let's do practice. That'll help you remember longer instead of go back and study everything at once. Number 2 is the study of the effect of eating oatmeal on lowering blood pressure. Number 3. So what are go back to the 4 things that we talked about: observational, conduct an experiment, simulation, use simulation, and survey. Which one is which? Okay. Okay, there's 12 of you respond. I have 28, 14. Okay, I'm going to start show some response. The first one is observation. Okay, I'm not saying this right or wrong. I'm just reading your response. Okay, so just 1, 2, 3, 4. Simulation, experiment, simulation. Okay, some of you are finished. Some still typing. Some is blank. Okay. The high response. A study of the effect of changing the flight patterns of a number of airplane accidents. For this one is you just study the effect of flight change. So for this one, you're not really do an experiment. So for those who chose experiment, it's not it. I hear maybe someone put in the chat or something. Can you just hold on for 1 second? Let me finish up. So the study of the effect of flight patterns, I saw some of you put down use simulation. I can take simulation because we talk airplane accidents, so we can use a model. We can use a mathematical, like a way to calculate that. So simulation would best to describe this one, but I use observation. I may take it if you can back yourself up by saying these are my reasons. But number 1 is the study. We use a model. Most likely we use a model, a mathematical way to look at it, or we can use simulations, right? So number 1 is simulation. So that's fine. Number 2, I forgot what most of you chose for number 2. Okay, this person say observational. Not yet. Observational, perform experiments, okay. We don't have statistic in here. Statistic is like an object, so case study is not the 4 thing that we just talked about. So you, for this person, you use statistic and case study. That's not the full way to collect data, so you want to change that. Okay, I see split between observation and experiment for number 2. Number 2 is an experiment. It's not observation. Like I said, it's not observational because observational is that you observe and you don't do anything. But this one, you actually have people. You can observe the people eating oatmeal, so you provide them. You tell them you can have the group. This group is eating oatmeal, and this group not going to eat oatmeal, and then you compare them. Okay, because if you don't have the untreatment group, there's no point. If you just look at all the people eating oatmeal, you have to compare them as well. So for this one, you actually do some experiment. You have some, for this one, you kind of like give the oatmeal. So you give some sort of treatment. You do something, you control, right? You did something to the group that you want to observe. So this one is an experiment. I can see why you do observation. It's not quite because you did an experiment first. You give them oatmeal. So that's different. Number 3, let me see what most of you say for number 3. Experiments, observation, survey, observational, survey. Okay. All right, so I see most of you see observational. So observational for number 3 is correct. It's not an experiment because you're not experimenting anything, right? You just look at the 4th grade, solve a puzzle. You just look at how they do it. You don't have, like, at the end, you're not going to say, well, it's not like you don't have a question to start. Like over here, number 2, you say, does oatmeal lower blood pressure? And then you test it. For number 3, you don't really have any question for it. Like, okay, I just want to see how a 4th grade solve a puzzle, right? So for number 3 is observational. I saw some of you say survey. It's not a survey because you're not asking question or anything. You're just like there to record the information. Number 4 is study of U.S. resident approval of ratings of the U.S. president is really applied to us right now, right? You have 20 some days before the election. So survey, not there yet. Survey. Yes. Interview. Yes, interview is a form of doing a survey. Correct. So number 4, instead of say interview, you want to say survey. We do survey. Okay. Survey is good. So number 4, showing survey is good. That would give you. So survey is the answer for number 4. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a question from you right now. Okay. For this one, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. For this one, what I would do is I'm going to turn on my dashboard and I want to see who. The next one, I would like you to jot down these 5. Take about a couple of seconds, jot this down, because now once we collect the data, we talk about the ways that we can collect samples. Okay, ways that we can collect them, because like we talked about this earlier, it's really hard for us to collect data from the population. So most of the time we do from sample. We cannot do all the U.S. adults. We do part of it. So these are the ways that we can collect and how we decide which group will be our sample. Okay, so these are the 5 things: random, stratify, cluster, systematic, and convenient. These are the 5. Jot it down somewhere so you have the names. And these are the names that we're going to use to answer questions. Okay. Okay. If you need me to come back, let me know. I'm going to move on to the next one. I don't know if you've done copy. Are we good? Or you can copy this along the way. You should have the names, okay? So for the first one, one way that we collect the sample is called random. The name itself is kind of self-explained. It's random. That means every member in the population has an equal chance of being selected. So for example, for this class, I can call on any one of you, maybe the one that I will call on, right? So I can say, Jocelyn, Sean, give me the answer to this question. Or I may say, Justin, do this one, all right? So when I call names, so that anyone have an equal chance of being called upon. Or you think about the lottery. I don't know if you watch it. I remember, is that at night, like at 10 o'clock? You know, they have a basket with a ball inside, and they just roll, and then the ball drops, and then you look at that number and you call that out. So it's random. It's really random because you don't get to choose. You don't have a system. There's no pattern. I just feel like calling someone, right? So random. That is one. That's the example. That's the name. Okay. So the next way that we can choose a sample would be stratified. Stratified is a little bit harder to understand. There's one mistake on my PowerPoint, is that this one, I should not circle this, okay? So ignore this one. Okay. Stratify is that they're going to pull the same characteristic, but from different groups. What that means is that you're going to have many, many groups, and whatever you pull from one group, you do the same for the other, okay? So for group 1, for example, I'm choosing mint and blue. So for group 2, I should choose the same color, mint and blue. Group 3, I'm going to choose the same, which is mint and blue. Okay. This one, like I said, I'm pulling the same characteristics, right? Another example I gave you, like I'm going to pull 2 male students from every senior class for survey. The same. I'm pulling the same characteristics. I'm going to pull female. I'm going to do with female for all of them. Okay. So that is the stratify, meaning I'm going to collect the same from each group. Okay. The next one is cluster. Cluster is different than the cluster is different than stratify a little bit. So cluster is different than stratify a little bit is that cluster you still split into groups, okay? But instead of pulling the same member from each group, for this one, you can see that you can do the whole group to do the survey, or you can ask questions. You can pull one, or you may pull more than one group, but you do the entire group. So for example, I'm looking at senior advisor, right? Instead of do one female per advisor, I'm gonna advisory instead of one female from for every advisory. I'm gonna choose one advisory and do interview about plans after high school. So cluster means I'm taking the entire group instead of pulling from each group. So that's different, okay? So the key thing is all. They do all, right? And then it's just one or more group. So the entire group, whatever you chose, is the entire group. That's the difference between cluster and stratify. Stratify is same, but from every single group. Okay. The next one that we'll talk about is systematic. For this one, I think it's the easiest one to understand is systematic is that you have a system, you have a way of doing things. You have a specific way of doing things. It's very organized. You know what you're doing. You set a pattern. There is a pattern to this. So for example, over here, we can say that we can assign a number, but doesn't mean that these two have to be true, okay? You assign a number, and then you use that number to organize your data in some way. But you don't just assign a number and do nothing about it, and that's not systematic. We have situations where you assign numbers, but that's nothing to do with that number. There's no pattern. There's no specific way of doing things. So be very careful with the example that we're going to run into next. So for this one, we choose every fifth member to do a survey. On the bottom, I'm choosing every third person, right? I'm skipping, sorry, I don't mean to do that one. But like I skip every two, right? I pull and I do survey. So skip two in the middle. These two skipped. So that's systematic. You have a way, a specific way of doing something. There is a pattern. There's a reason for you to do it. Versus random, I can just randomly choose any number. So that's different. There's still numbers involved, but I don't have a specific way to explain it. This one, I say, yeah, every third person or so, I would do that. Okay, the last one is convenient. Convenient, the name itself, it tells you it's there, it's easy, it's convenient. You don't have to go out of your way. Like for right now, I'm saying, hey seniors, can you do the survey for me, right? So I can do that. I'm like, just do a survey for me, and then you do it, okay? I don't have to go out and go to the neighborhood and do survey. So those are the things that I'm looking for. So that's convenient. Okay, we have an example so let's look at the example that we have right here. Number one, you select at random and question each student in the class. So random, question each student, but this one is that you select a class. That is mean there are many, many classes for you to choose from, and then you choose one class. Okay, so that is mean for this one it's not random, even though the word random is here, but you choose a class, the entire class out of many other classes. So for this one, number one, this one is cluster. It's not random, okay, it's cluster, because you choose a whole class out of how many, I don't know. They say you select a class and you question all of the students in that class. So this number one, is cluster. Okay. If you forgot, I will post this clip. Like I said, I record what I'm saying every day. You can go back and just fast forward to the place that you want to go back and review, so you don't have to watch the whole thing. Number two, you divide the student population with respect to majors, and then randomly select and question some student in each major. So you split it up into major. Majors means it splits up into groups. And then you select and question from each major. So for this one, it's Stratified. And the reason why it's Stratified is that you split into groups, which is we call major in this case. Okay. And then you ask questions from students from each major. So that's Stratified. Okay. The last one should be number 3. I don't know why my number 3 disappeared. Say you assign each student a number and generate random number, then you question each student whose number is randomly selected. This one is say randomly selected, so this one is random. Okay, this should be random. Okay. So we have about 4 minutes. I'm gonna stop the lesson right here, but this